She smiled through it all, the quiet insult, the cold shoulders, the family jokes that stung more than they should have. At her own family BBQ, her husband's sister laughed and said, "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." Everyone laughed except her. But what happens when the woman who's always been the peacemaker finally walks away? What does it take for someone to leave behind the life they built, the man they once loved, and the silence they tried so hard to survive? And more importantly, what do they find on the other side of that silence? This is not just a story of heartbreak. It's a story of awakening, of one woman's quiet rebellion against the role she was told to play, and the space she finally dared to take up. So if you've ever felt unseen, if you've ever swallowed pain just to keep the peace, this story is for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because what you're about to hear might just shift something inside you. Now, let's begin. I used to tell myself that I was just being sensitive, that it wasn't that deep, that they didn't mean anything by it. That's what you do when you're trying to belong to a family that's never really seen you. But that changed on a Saturday in June. It was our 5th year attending the Ellison family's annual summer barbecue, held on the perfectly manicured lawn behind Charles and Margaret's colonial-style house in Maple Hill. It was less a gathering and more a performance. Every hedge clipped, every skewer curated, a celebration of family legacy and reputation. Disguised as casual tradition, Cameron, my husband, had been looking forward to it for weeks. Me, not so much. I'd spent the morning baking 2 trays of lemon raspberry bars from my grandmother's recipe. They were the only thing anyone had complimented me on the year before. Small wins, I told myself. Take them where you can. By 11:30, we were dressed and out the door. Cameron in his pale blue button-up, sleeves rolled just so. Me, in a floral sundress I'd picked specifically to match Margaret's idea of garden-appropriate elegance. I remember adjusting the neckline in the car, wondering if it looked trying too hard. We pulled into the driveway to the sound of laughter already echoing across the yard. The air smelled like grilled peaches and seared meat. Vivian was the first to spot us. She waved with her usual 2-finger salute, holding a glass of white wine in her other hand. Vivian always wore white linen at these things. Immaculate, crisp, intimidating. She kissed Cameron's cheek, then turned to me with that trademark half smile. "Marin, that dress is so cheerful. You'll fit right in with the tablecloths." I smiled, because what else do you do? We moved inside to drop off the dessert. Margaret glanced at the tray and said, "Oh, you baked again. How sweet. I'll make sure it gets somewhere." She waved vaguely toward the kitchen counter. It was the same routine, the same casual coldness. Every year, but this time, I felt it more sharply, as if something inside me had thinned. We made our way outside. People were milling around the grill, laughing too loudly, sipping from sweating glasses. I floated between groups, smiling, nodding, trying to find a pocket of warmth. Cameron was already deep in conversation with his father, gesturing toward the new patio tiles. I knew better than to interrupt. Vivian joined us at the main picnic table around 1 p.m., sliding into her seat like royalty. She was holding court, regaling the group with some story about a client who tried to expense a private helicopter for a date. Everyone was hanging on her every word. At one point, she turned toward me. "Oh, Marin, you'll like this. This guy reminded me of your old freelance clients. You know, the ones who think branding means picking a font and adding glitter." Laughter. Another little dig. I tried to chuckle, but it got stuck somewhere behind my ribs. Still, I waited. I knew I had to find my moment if I wanted to feel like I existed here. And when there was a lull in conversation, I spoke. I've actually just wrapped a branding project for a local arts foundation. They're launching next month. It's one of my proudest pieces. Vivian looked at me for exactly 1 second longer than necessary. Then she said it. If you disappeared tomorrow, Marin, no one here would even notice. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't angry. It was casual, almost lazy. But it sucked the air from the table. And what gutted me wasn't just her voice. It was the laughter that followed. Even Cameron. I stared at the lemonade glass in front of me. The condensation trailed down my fingers like tiny tears. I felt invisible, but hypervisible at the same time. My mouth dried. My heart didn't race, it stopped. I could hear every clink of cutlery, every rustle of leaves. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't storm off like the unstable woman they probably expected me to be. Instead, I picked up my plastic fork, stabbed a piece of grilled corn, raised it in a mock toast, and said quietly, "Challenge accepted." The table went still for a breath. Then Charles asked someone to pass the coleslaw, and the moment dissolved like sugar in water. But I didn't. Not this time. I sat there and watched it all, the comfort, the laughter, the assumed belonging. And I made a decision. So quiet and steady, it surprised even me. This was the last time I'd be invisible in my own life. You don't wake up one morning and realize you've disappeared. It happens slowly, quietly, in inches, not miles. Looking back, I can trace the erosion of myself not to one moment, but to a series of small surrenders. Each one seemed harmless, just one tiny compromise for the sake of love, or family, or peace. Cameron and I met in a bookstore. I know, that sounds like a line from a rom-com, but it's true. He was reaching for a copy of Invisible Cities at the same time I was. We both laughed. He let me have it. We ended up talking for 20 minutes beside the travel section. I liked that he listened, that he didn't rush his words, that he remembered I was a designer by the end of our first conversation. He made me feel seen. Back then, I was freelancing for nonprofits and small businesses, working from home, hopping between coffee shops, designing logos, brand identities, social content on my own terms. I liked it. I felt alive in it. Cameron was corporate finance, spreadsheet language, and quarterly projections. But he wasn't cold. Not yet. He brought me warm croissants during deadlines, asked to see my sketches, said things like, "You have such a good eye for emotion and color." He made space for me. At first, we married 2 years after we met. It was beautiful. In that way, weddings are when no one's angry yet. Vivian gave a toast that included 3 backhanded compliments and 1 pointed story about Cameron's high school girlfriend. I laughed politely, even then. Our first apartment had terrible light, but the best kitchen window. I planted herbs and took afternoon calls beside it. When I landed a regional food brand as a client, Cameron framed the first packaging mock-up and hung it above our desk. And when his company offered him a promotion that required longer hours and weekend networking, I didn't even hesitate. "Of course," I said, "we'll make it work." We talked about starting a family soon, about saving for a house. He promised the new role would fast-track all of it. What he didn't say, but what I came to learn, was that we would not be the ones making it work. I would. The late nights, the solo weekends, the pressure to step back from work so I could support his forward motion. And I did. First, I gave up one of my longest-running clients because the timing no longer fit his schedule. Then I passed on a creative retreat in Austin because it clashed with his firm's annual gala. Then I stopped updating my portfolio, and before long, I stopped drawing just for me. The silence didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, like mist. Cameron's family helped, not intentionally, but efficiently. Margaret would say things like, "It's so sweet that you still design. Must be such a nice hobby." Vivian would ask if I ever thought about doing real branding for corporations instead of those Etsy types. Charles once asked me, in front of a dozen guests, "So what do you actually do all day?" They smiled when they said it, but smiles can cut just as clean as sneers. I remember the first time I skipped a networking event I was invited to. It was for local women entrepreneurs. Cameron said, "Do you really want to go all the way downtown for that? I thought we could use a quiet night in." I said yes, to him, and no, to myself, again. The miscarriage happened 2 winters ago. It was early, 11 weeks, just enough time to feel the hope, not long enough for anyone else to take it seriously. Cameron was out of town. Vivian sent a link to an article about stress and pregnancy. Margaret sent a card that read, "Sometimes things happen for a reason." I never cried in front of them. I saved that for the shower. The only place I felt safely alone. Becca flew in and slept on my couch for 3 nights. She brought soup. She didn't talk unless I started it. When she did, she listened like the world was ending and I was the only one she believed. I clung to her presence like a dock during a storm. She asked once, gently, "Do they even know who you are, Mayor?" And I remember answering, "I don't know if I do anymore." I wasn't angry then. Not yet. I was tired. Tired of shrinking to fit into a space that had never expanded for me. Tired of watching my husband nod along to things that hurt me. Tired of believing that love meant endurance. So when Vivian made her joke at the BBQ, "If you disappeared tomorrow," no one would even notice. It didn't shock me. It just echoed what I'd been whispering to myself for months. Only now, I was ready to answer it out loud. I didn't leave that night because I was angry. I left because I was finally done. After Vivian's words sank into the grass like poison, the rest of the barbecue carried on as if nothing had happened. People laughed, ate, posed for pictures. Cameron smiled for every photo like nothing inside me had just shattered. I played my role too. I knew how. But the quiet in me was different this time. It wasn't surrender. It was stillness before a storm. We drove home with the windows cracked, the summer air thick with silence. Cameron hummed to the radio, oblivious, or maybe pretending. I stared out the window, counting streetlights like heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. He pulled into our driveway and stretched like the day had been satisfying. "I think that went well," he said. Vivian was a bit much, but you know how she is. I nodded. Inside, he poured himself a drink, loosened his collar, kicked off his shoes. I walked straight to the bedroom and opened the closet. I didn't even know what I was looking for at first. Then I saw it. A canvas duffel bag we'd used for weekend trips to the coast. Still smelled faintly of sea salt and rosemary. I pulled it down. I started packing. A pair of jeans, 2 soft t-shirts, my sketchbook, my grandmother's recipe notebook, my backup drive, and my quietest resolve. Cameron found me mid-fold, his brow furrowed. "Babe, what are you doing?" I looked up, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't soften my voice, didn't shrink. "I'm leaving," I said calmly. No drama, no screams, just truth. He blinked. "What? Marin, are you serious?" "Yes." Because of Vivian's joke, she was just messing around. You know how she gets when she drinks. "This isn't about Vivian," I said, though it was. And it wasn't. This is about every moment I've been invisible in a family that never tried to know me. About you laughing at that table when I needed you. About every time I made myself smaller so you could feel bigger. He scoffed, stepping back. That's not fair. No, I whispered. It's not, but it's true. He crossed his arms. So what, you're just walking out? Throwing everything away, I met his eyes. I'm walking towards something. Finally. The conversation didn't go past that. He didn't stop me. Didn't beg. I think a part of him expected me to cool off. Come back after a night at Becca's. That's what I'd always done. But that night was different. I zipped the duffel, slipped on my shoes, took one last look at the frame logo on our wall, the one he used to be proud of. Then I left, not with rage, but with relief. The air outside was thick and humid. Streetlights buzzed softly above me. It was just past midnight. Becca's spare room was waiting. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. She handed me a mug of tea, wrapped me in a blanket, and sat with me in silence. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't grieving, but because the grief had already passed through me like a storm. And what was left was clarity. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months. Not because everything was fixed, but because I had finally chosen myself. In the morning, I woke to the smell of pancakes and a note from Becca. In case no one said it lately. You matter. Loudly. I stared at those words, my throat tightening. Then I poured myself a coffee and opened my laptop. There was no grand plan, no map, just one quiet question that sat in my chest like a seed. Who am I when no one is watching? And so I began again, not to prove anything, not to seek revenge, but to remember, to rebuild, to breathe in a life I didn't have to fight to be part of. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was staying gone. Staying gone meant waking up in a quiet room that didn't carry the shape of another body beside me. It meant sipping coffee at Becca's tiny kitchen table, wondering what I'd built my life around for the past 6 years and whether any of it had truly belonged to me. Becca didn't crowd me. She gave me space, but filled the silence with small things. The rhythm of a blender in the morning, the clink of spoons and mismatched mugs, soft jazz from her ancient speaker. The world, I realized, did not collapse when I left Cameron. No one from his family reached out. Not a text, not a call, not even a passive-aggressive meme from Vivian. The silence should have hurt, but it felt like clean air. I spent the first week doing nothing but walking through the arboretum, along quiet trails near the lake, past rows of antique stores with cracked windows and fading signs. At first, I walked to forget, then I walked to remember. Remember the way I used to stop and sketch whatever caught my eye, the curve of a leaf, the tilt of an awning, the laugh lines on a stranger's face. So I bought a new sketch pad, unwrapped the pencils I hadn't touched in a year, and sat under a willow tree, letting my hands speak where words had failed me. The first lines were shaky, then they steadied, then they flowed. I drew every day after that, in coffee shops, on buses, at park benches while toddlers threw crackers at pigeons. For the first time in so long, I wasn't designing for approval. I was creating to feel alive. One afternoon, I passed by a storefront with a small, faded sign, The Violet House, Community Studio and Gallery. Something about it tugged at me. Inside, I found wooden floors, high ceilings, and a woman with streaks of silver in her hair, her hands clay-stained, her smile warm like bread from the oven. Her name was Isabel Moreno. She ran classes and artist circles, offered open studio hours, and let newcomers wander without pressure. She looked at my sketchpad and said, "You have softness with courage. That's rare." I didn't know what to say. She pointed to a corkboard cluttered with event flyers. Ever done live sketching at a gallery show? I blinked. No. You should. Next Thursday. Here. Come. No pressure. But we'd love to see you. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from anxiety. From excitement. Something in me had cracked open again. Not the old Marin. Someone new. Someone unafraid to take up space. I went, hands trembling, but I went. I sat up near the window and began to sketch. People came and went. They looked. They watched. Some asked if I sold prints. I didn't even know what to say. Becca came, of course, cheering softly from a stool in the corner. She took a photo and said, "You're glowing. You know that." Right. For the first time in forever, I believed her. In the weeks that followed, I moved into a small studio above a flower shop. One room, high window, quiet light. I painted the walls a shade of moss green and bought a second-hand desk from a retired architect. I made a home. I built a small brand freelance again, this time on my terms. Clients who respected boundaries, work that felt purposeful. Isabel offered to feature 3 of my pieces in the next show. I almost said no, then I didn't, because I remembered what it felt like to be erased, and I promised myself I would never hand someone the eraser again. One night, curled up with tea and a sketch pad, I thought of Cameron, not with bitterness, but with distance. He had been a chapter, not the whole book, and I wasn't angry anymore. I was grateful. Grateful that I had finally chosen to live in full color again, because for the first time in years, I could see myself clearly, and I liked what I saw. Some truths don't need to be spoken out loud, but sometimes writing them down is the only way to let them go. It was a rainy Tuesday when I opened my laptop, not to work, not to design, but to write a letter I knew I'd never send. To Cameron. It began simply. You probably think I left because of one joke at one barbecue, but this began long before that, and you know it. I paused, my fingers hovered, and then I let it flow. Do you remember the first time I met your family? Your mother called me refreshingly humble. Your sister asked where I bought my dress, then laughed when I said it was secondhand. You said nothing. I told myself I could win them over. If I just stayed kind, if I didn't rock the boat, if I played the part. But here's the thing. Cam kindness should never require vanishing. And somewhere along the way, I disappeared. I sat back, breathed. Rain tapped against the window like soft punctuation. I kept writing. Marin. I'm not angry anymore. I was, for a long time. I felt like I was screaming underwater while everyone smiled above the surface. You never heard me. Or maybe you chose not to. But now I see that your silence said more than words ever could. When you didn't defend me, it wasn't neutrality. It was alignment. You picked a side. You just didn't say it out loud. Terminator. I paused again. Took a sip of lukewarm tea. Let my heart beat slow. Then typed the last part slowly. I don't need anything from you, not closure, not apology. This letter isn't for you. It's for me. To mark the place where I stopped explaining myself. To mark the beginning of the woman who no longer waits to be seen. Goodbye, Cameron, not in bitterness, in truth, Marinus. I read it once, then saved it in a folder titled Unsent, not to hold on, but to remind myself I had spoken, even if only to the page. That night, I walked to the Violet House for an evening sketch session. The room was lit with low amber light. Someone played old Ella Fitzgerald in the corner. I sat by the window, charcoal in hand, and I began to draw something I hadn't dared in months, a self-portrait. Not the smiling headshot I used for my portfolio, not the curated version of myself I'd shown the world for so long, but the woman I was, now softer in some places, stronger in others, a little tired, maybe, but rooted in the truth that I was enough, even when no one clapped. Halfway through the sketch, Isabel passed by, glanced down, and nodded. "You're seeing her clearly now," she said. I didn't need to ask who she meant. I knew. 3 days later, a text arrived from a number I hadn't seen in months. "Vivian, saw your work in Isabel's window. Impressive. Can't lie, it surprised me." I stared at the screen, then locked it. I didn't need her praise or her permission, but something inside me finally loosened. She saw me. Too late. But still. That evening, I walked past a bookstore, bought myself a hardcover journal, and wrote just one line on the first page. "The version of me they ignored is the version I love most." Then I smiled and kept walking. Some ghosts knock. Others walk right in. It was a crisp Sunday afternoon when Becca came home holding 2 lattes and a tight smile. "You have company," she said, uninvited. I raised a brow. Who? Before she could answer, I heard the voice, low, too familiar. Marin. I turned, and there he was, Cameron, standing in my doorway like no time had passed, wearing that same navy coat, same neat haircut, but not the same power over me, not anymore. He looked at me the way someone looks at a stranger who shares their memories, like he couldn't quite match the woman in front of him, with the one he used to call his wife. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped outside, not for him, for me. I needed distance from the space I'd claimed. We stood on the stoop, just far enough for my breath to stay mine. He rubbed his hands together. I found out about the gallery. Isabel posted photos. I nodded, silent. "You're really good, Marin." I didn't say thank you. He shifted, uncertain now. "Look, I didn't come to reopen wounds. He stopped, then looked me straight in the eye. I should have spoken up that day. A long beat passed, and all the days before it. I replied, voice steady. His shoulders sagged. I thought being neutral was the polite thing to do. I didn't want to cause more tension. I looked at him. "Do you know what it's like?" I said. "To be hurt in public, in front of people who claim to love you and realize you're the only one fighting for your place at the table." He opened his mouth, closed it. "I thought I could love you enough to survive your silence," I continued. "But silence is loud, Cam. It's a wall you built every time you didn't speak." He stepped back slightly, as if the weight of my words pressed against his chest. "I didn't realize how much I relied on you to be the quiet one," he said. "To keep the peace? To absorb it all?" "I know," I said, "and that's why I had to leave." The wind picked up. Leaves rustled around our feet. He glanced at the sketchbook peeking from my bag. "I hope you're happy," he said, softly. "I am." That answer used to feel like a wish. Now it was a truth. He gave a faint nod. And for the first time, he didn't try to argue, just turned, stepped down the path, and walked away. I stood still for a long while after he disappeared from view, not out of sadness, but because I had done something I once thought impossible. I faced my past and didn't fold. I wasn't trembling, wasn't doubting. I felt light, like shedding the final layer of someone else's expectations. When I walked back inside, Becca was sitting cross-legged on the couch, arms folded. Well, she asked, "He's gone," I said. She raised her eyebrows, and I smiled. "I didn't lose my voice this time." She grinned. "That's my girl." That night, I sat by the window, watching the city's lights flicker like Morse code, and in my journal, I wrote, "Healing isn't about closure. It's about courage, the kind that doesn't need to be seen to be real." I closed the book, turned off the lamp, and slept, unshaken. It wasn't a grand day. No fireworks, no confetti, just a Tuesday morning with sunlight slipping through linen curtains. But it was the day I took up space, real space, physical, emotional, creative, and I didn't shrink to make anyone more comfortable. The community gallery at the Violet House was buzzing. People wandered in and out. The scent of paint still lingered in the air. My 3 pieces were framed and hung side by side center stage. I watched a woman linger at my self-portrait. She tilted her head, studying the soft pencil strokes that formed my jaw, the shadows under my eyes, the strength in the curve of my shoulders. "I don't know why," she whispered to her friend, "but I feel like she's telling me it's okay to not have it all figured out." Her words caught me off guard, because that was exactly what I had hoped people would see. Not perfection, not resilience, masked as silence, but truth raw, unfinished, honest. Becca arrived with her usual dramatic flair, balancing a box of pastries and iced coffees like it was an Olympic sport. She handed me a croissant and winked. "You've got a line forming, Miss Marin the Magnificent." I laughed, but when I turned, she wasn't kidding. People were waiting. Some wanted to ask about my art. Some just wanted to say thank you. One woman said, "Your piece made me cry. I haven't cried in weeks. I think I needed it." Another whispered, "I left my fiancé last year. No one talks about how lonely it is after. Thank you for putting that feeling into something I could point to and say, that's me." I held her hand for a second longer than necessary, and when she left, I let myself cry, too. Not from pain, from release. Isabel tapped my shoulder later that afternoon. "Ready for your next challenge?" she asked. I blinked. "That wasn't it." She smiled. "You're hosting a community workshop next month. Beginner sketching, women-led, safe space. You game." My heart skipped. Old Marin would have hesitated, questioned if she was worthy, feared rejection, but now I nodded. "I'm in." That night, I sat alone in my small studio. No background noise, no distractions, just the quiet hum of possibility. I lit a candle, pulled out a fresh sheet of paper, and began to draw again. But this time, I wasn't drawing myself. I was sketching the next chapter, a woman standing barefoot in a room filled with light, surrounded by colors only she could name. A woman who finally understood. She didn't need to be loud to be powerful. She didn't need to be perfect to be worthy. And she didn't need anyone's approval to take up space. She just needed to show up, fully, honestly, unapologetically. The final line of the sketch was a smile, subtle, soft, but absolutely certain, just like me. And so, that was the day I stopped disappearing. The day I looked around and realized I was not invisible. I was not fragile. I was not broken. I was here, seen, heard, whole, and I was never leaving myself again. She didn't shout. She didn't slam doors. She simply left. And in that quiet, steady walk away, she reclaimed everything they tried to take from her. This was never just about one cruel comment at a BBQ. It was about the 1,000 subtle ways society teaches some of us to disappear to make ourselves small, agreeable, silent. But Marin didn't disappear. She rose. And in doing so, she reminded us all every person deserves to be seen. Every voice has the right to be heard. And no one, absolutely no one, should ever be made to feel like they don't matter. So if you've ever felt overlooked, unheard, or unworthy, know this: you're not alone. And your story matters more than you think. Let this be a call to compassion and a challenge to every family, every friend group, every partner. Watch how you treat the quiet ones. They might just be the ones with the strongest hearts. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We've got more powerful, real, and deeply human stories coming your way. Until next time, take care of your heart and of each other.